LiberalViewer presents.
So, welcome to the May 1st edition of LiberalViewer Monday Media Mixup. Thanks for joining me. I'll be using the dozen best, most newsworthy clips I picked out from the Sunday morning news analysis shows from the big five corporate outlets of ABC, NBC, CBS, CNN, and Fox News, the so-called corporate media here in the United States, for which should be a really educational, informative, fair use media criticism and political commentary show for you all today. For my political comedy, I am going to take a couple clips from the White House Correspondents Dinner. It's like the political comedy event of the year that was Saturday night in Washington, D.C. And that's where I'm getting my title from, is from, what's so great about the White House Correspondents Dinner is you have the President of the United States most years. There were a couple years off there with Trump and with COVID, but the President of the United States doing a stand-up comedy routine, and then some comedian also speaking truth to power, doing something special. And this year it was Roy Wood Jr. I'm a big fan of Roy Wood Jr., who you may know from The Daily Show. I've actually seen him do his stand-up routine twice live here in Sacramento at the Punchline Comedy Club. I think both times I was even in the front row, which is like the best way to experience stand-up comedy, I think, because it's a little more interactive sometimes, and also you don't have to like see all the other people or whatever. Anyway, I'm going to give you what I think is the best of Roy Wood Jr.'s stand-up routine after I show you a brief clip of Joe Biden, where I got the title of the video. But you can watch the entire Joe Biden stand-up routine and the entire Roy Wood Jr. stand-up routine on the C-SPAN YouTube channel at links I put down in the video description right under sources. And I will start with the ending joke that Joe Biden made on Saturday that I'll talk about with you a little more after we watch together over here.
We're going to turn this over to Roy. Roy, the podium is yours. I'm going to be fine with your jokes, but I'm not sure about Dark Brandon.
So yeah, that's I guess Joe Biden trying to seem young, hip, and memey. That's like the whole Dark Brandon meme that got started, and that is started when Joe Biden started accomplishing things and winning, basically doing a lot better in the midterms than a lot of people thought he would, and uh, that is to try to counteract the fact that if he is reelected, he'll be the oldest president ever. He'd be like 86 years old when he leaves office. He's 80 right now. And that was a topic on all the Sunday shows, and that's mostly what I'll be covering. Although, if you keep going to the clips at the end, I have Gary Cohn talking to Margaret Brennan on CBS News' Face the Nation about the possibility of a recession and how mild or deep it might be, and that also I think is something that could decide the election more than how old Biden is. And then the last clip is the culture wars. It's one of the Republican candidates you've never heard of, Vivek Ramaswamy. Well, maybe you probably heard of him if you've been watching my show regularly. This is the 100th episode of Monday Media Mix-Up, and if you've been watching it, I already had clips of Vivek Ramaswamy earlier, but here he is sort of indulging in the culture wars, and Chuck Todd doesn't do a great job of cross-examining him, so who would believe that? But before I get to the news summaries and the newsmaker clips, I did say I was going to show you the best of Roy Wood Jr.'s stand-up routine. This was like a really well crafted series of jokes that all like kind of held together about like crypto and NFTs and critical race theory and Clarence Thomas, and I will talk about it with you a little more after we watch that clip together over here.
The only thing Ron DeSantis has done that I got to give him credit for, this boy that got people riled up over stuff they can't understand. They don't know what critical race theory is. Got these people riled up about something that they can't even define, like crypto or NFTs. Ask any Republican that's anti-CRT. Ask any Republican trying to explain CRT. They sound like a Democrat trying to explain the charges against Trump. It's bad. They're everywhere. You just gotta stop it. We gotta stop it. We got the files. We got files. We'll be right back. I'm Rachel Maddow. I have files. Rachel Maddow get them files on you. It's a wrap. I think Republicans, y'all would be surprised, man, if y'all would just be real about what CRT is. You can be surprised. Some black folks might meet you halfway. But you gotta tell the truth. You can't lie to black people. Call it what it is. Anti-CRT policies are an attack on black history and an attempt to erase the contributions of black people from the history books. That's what it is. You are trying to erase black people, and a lot of black people wouldn't mind some of that erasure as long as that black person is Clarence Thomas. A billionaire named Harlan Crow is flying Clarence Thomas all over the world on unreported trips, like an Instagram model, taking Clarence to the Maldives and the beaches and all. Paid for his mama's house, this billionaire. Paid for Clarence Thomas' mama's house. I gotta give it up to billionaires. Billionaires, boy, y'all are relentless. Y'all always come up with something new to buy. Like, just when you think of everything you could buy on Earth, a billionaire will come up with a new thing. Y'all buy space rockets, you bought Twitter. This man bought a Supreme Court justice. Do you understand how rich you have to be to buy a black one on top of that? There's only 2 in stock. And Harlan Crow owns half the inventory. We can all see Clarence Thomas, but he belongs to billionaire Harlan Crow. And that's what an NFT is.
So yeah, that was an awesome set by Roy Wood Jr. He made fun of everybody, right and left, and media, and it's definitely worth watching, including watch Joe Biden's routine as well. Like I said, they're both down under the sources heading in the video description. Finish watching this show first, of course, but then go watch them, because Roy Wood Jr. was really funny. Joe Biden was pretty funny and showed that he's, not senile. He has, doing a stand-up routine, even reading it from a teleprompter, isn't an easy thing to do. And I don't know, I think it definitely helped him, if helps deal with this age issue, which, like I said, is covered by most of the news summaries here. And now I'm going to show you the news summaries from longest to shortest. The longest one was ABC's This Week with George Stephanopoulos. Martha Raddatz was in, and she had the reporter Mary Bruce talking very seriously about the problems with Biden's age. So don't think ABC is, the liberal media. This, you don't really hear this type of negative coverage of Republicans over on Fox News, or very, very rarely. And and you'll see that Martha Raddatz also brings it up when talking to Senator Chris Coons, the senator from Delaware, who's one of the co-chairs of Biden's campaign. That will be one of, I'll show you Bernie Sanders, Chris Coons, Chris Van Hollen as 3 Democrats trying to defend Biden and his age in different ways. And those will be the first 3 newsmaker clips after I get through these news summaries, starting with ABC's This Week with George Stephanopoulos. As I said, Martha Raddatz hosting This Week over here.
Good morning and welcome to This Week. Since taking office in 2021, Joe Biden has faced questions about whether he would seek a second term, and as the oldest president in American history, whether he could serve a full 8 years. On Tuesday, he put any doubts about his intentions to rest, formally kicking off his campaign in a 3-minute video. asking voters to let him, quote, finish the job, and warning that American democracy is still at risk. But those concerns about his age still linger. We heard it this week in Pennsylvania, where we went to take the pulse of the swing state voters. And it's become a focal point of attacks from the Republicans vying for the GOP nomination, despite the fact that their frontrunner is just 4 years younger. We'll cover the story from every angle this morning, along with the battle on Capitol Hill over raising the nation's borrowing limit. But we begin this morning at the White House with Chief White House Correspondent Mary Bruce. Good morning, Mary.
Martha, good morning. Well, after teasing this announcement for months, President Biden made it official, asking Americans to give him another 4 years and setting up a potential rematch with Donald Trump.
This is not a time to be complacent. That's why I'm running for re-election.
Exactly 4 years after launching his successful run for the White House, the president kicked off his re-election bid, pledging to protect key American values.
Personal freedom is fundamental to who we are as Americans. There's nothing more important, nothing more sacred.
Just like last time, the president is arguing we are in a battle for the soul of the nation against what he calls MAGA Republicans.
Courage, opportunity, democracy, freedom. They're under attack by an extreme movement that seeks to overturn elections, ban books, and eliminate a woman's right to choose.
But there was no big rally, no road trip, and no major speech. The president softly launching his bid for re-election. The Democratic primary will look very different. Biden is not expected to face a major opponent for the nomination. But he is facing some major challenges. According to one poll, 70% of Americans, including a majority of Democrats, say he should not run again. A major concern, his age. Biden would be 86 at the end of his second term. His response has always been to just watch him. What do you say to those Americans who are watching and aren't convinced?
I respect them taking a hard look at it. I take a hard look at it as well. I took a hard look at it before I decided to run. And I feel good.
His bare-bones operation is staffing up slowly, starting with campaign manager Julie Chavez Rodriguez, the top Latina aide at the White House and granddaughter of iconic labor leader Cesar Chavez. Now, Martha, we don't expect the campaign to really ramp up in earnest still for several more months, in part because Biden's team thinks their strongest argument is simply to show him doing the job, to show him being president. But there is no question that with all of these concerns about his age, the spotlight is going to be shining even more brightly on Vice President Kamala Harris. We are already seeing her take on a more prominent role, perhaps an effort to try and boost her popularity. She is now leading the charge on the fight for abortion and reproductive rights, so we can expect her to be front and center on major issues. Martha.
Thanks, Mary. Democratic Senator and Biden campaign national co-chair Chris Coons joins us now.
And like I said, I will have a clip of Chris Coons coming up, one of the 3 Democratic senators that I will be showing defending Biden and his age. And actually, I'm going to skip the Meet the Press news summary for a minute. I'll go back to it after the Fox News Sunday news summary, because I realized I should really juxtapose those two, because Fox News Sunday covers a lot of the same information. Biden's re-election announcement, and they talk about Biden's age. They never say, but he's only 4 years older than Trump, like you heard on ABC. And they talk so briefly about his announcement, like he said freedom this many times, and never talked about his age in his announcement. While you saw on ABC, they spent a lot of time talking about the themes and what he was running against, the so-called MAGA Republicans and everything. And they briefly mentioned that in the Fox News Sunday news summary, but not in the same way. ABC covered some of Biden's challenges, but also I think gave him the coverage of his substance that you would expect from a journalistic organization. But of course, Fox News Sunday is not a journalistic news organization. It's a propaganda outlet for the Republican Party, as it was created to be by Roger Ailes, as detailed in the book The Loudest Voice in the Room I have right over here. But I guess I got to mention that once a show. Well, not every show, but a lot of the shows. And you can see that propaganda demonstrated in the Fox News Sunday news summary. Shannon Bream, Lucas Tomlinson, over here.
Hello from Fox News in Washington. Now that both President Biden and former President Donald Trump are officially running in 2024, get ready to hear the word rematch a lot. But polls indicate voters in both parties are not so enthusiastic about the two front runners. Many telling pollsters they would be open to alternatives. In a moment, Republican National Committee Chair Ronna McDaniel joins us in studio on the GOP field and the biggest issues the party faces heading into 24. But first, let's turn to Lucas Tomlinson live in Washington with a look at the president's strategy as he asks for a second term. Hello, Lucas.
Shannon, after months of anticipation, President Biden made it official, announcing he will be running for re-election.
Let's finish this job. I know we can.
President Biden's campaign launch opens with January 6th. Abortion protests, and MAGA, including an image of former President Trump and Florida Governor Ron DeSantis. Biden mentions the word freedom 6 times in the 3-minute video. He did not mention his age, but the age question came up in a press briefing.
Does the president plan to serve all 8 years?
That's something for him to decide.
The press secretary cleared up the confusion later, tweeting the president would serve all 8 years. 2024 Republican candidate Nikki Haley did not mince words.
The idea that he would make it until 86 years old is not something that I think is likely.
And potential Republican presidential candidate Senator Tim Scott appeared to go there too.
Well, that should be a scary proposition. The only thing worse than a Joe Biden presidency is a Kamala Harris presidency.
Ladies and gentlemen, President Joe Biden.
Here in D.C. at the White House Correspondents Dinner last night, President Biden kept it light.
Look, y'all keep reporting my approval rating is 42%. Kevin McCarthy called me and asked me, Joe, what the hell's your secret?
And this week, our Fox News polls show only 44% have a favorable opinion of President Biden. 56% say they have an unfavorable opinion of him. Shannon?
All right, Lucas, we're going to talk a lot more about those polls. Thank you so much. Joining me now, Republican National Committee Chair.
And as you might expect, Shannon Bream did not ask Republican National Committee Chairperson Ronna Romney McDaniel about Donald Trump's age. Donald Trump being just 4 years younger than Joe Biden. But I think I kind of proved my point also by juxtaposing the Fox News Sunday news summary with the one from ABC, where I think ABC did a much better job of covering both sides, was much more fair and balanced. They don't even say fair and balanced on Fox News anymore. They're not even like pretending. I don't know. I think maybe at the end of Special Report, does Brett Baer say fair, balanced, and unafraid still? I think maybe he does. But other than that, you don't hear it a lot. It's not their big slogan. And anyway, in between those two is the NBC News Meet the Press news summary, which almost sounds like a Fox News Sunday news summaries in some ways, in that it focuses on immigration and the problems of the southern border. It goes back for like 10 years of history on U.S. immigration policy, which I don't know, is a little bit superficial, and superficiality, of course, is one of the biases that we see in all the cable news networks. And another one of the biases I talk about often is if they have an exclusive guest, they like skew their coverage towards making that exclusive guest seem more important. So the most important story this week on NBC News' Meet the Press is immigration, because they have Alexander Mayorkas, the Homeland Security Secretary, on. I'm not taking a clip of him because it's not my main topic, but here you can see Chuck Todd give, a kind of superficial 10-year history of immigration policy that I will talk a little more about after we watch it together over here.
And a good Sunday morning. You know, it was 10 years ago this very month that the Senate's so-called Gang of Eight rolled out an immigration reform plan that they believed could finally pass Congress.
We all wish we didn't have this problem, but we do, and we have to fix it. Because leaving things the way they are, that's the real amnesty.
I think 2013 is the year of immigration reform.
But it was not, and the laws haven't changed. 2 years later, Donald Trump would launch his presidential campaign, building his entire political identity on the issue of being tough on immigration and tough on the border. Trump even promised to wall off the nation's 2,000-mile southern border. And though the wall didn't materialize, his administration, in an attempt at deterrence at the border, instituted policies that included separating migrant children from their parents and instituting the Remain in Mexico program, which sent migrants back to Mexico while seeking U.S. asylum. Biden endorsed a sweeping immigration plan on his very first day in office. But the plan went nowhere, even though Democrats controlled both houses of Congress at the time. Instead, the administration has adopted several of the Trump policies he once criticized, including a transit ban, which will force some migrants to apply for asylum from their home countries. Now, as Biden formally runs for a second term, the immigration issue, which he never mentioned this week in his announcement video, continues to be one of his toughest challenges. In 2021, more migrants crossed the southern border than in any year since at least 1960. And in 2022, the record was broken again. In 2 weeks, an emergency public health rule known as Title 42 that has allowed both the Trump and Biden administrations to expel migrants and block most access to asylum at the border since March of 2020, allegedly to prevent the spread of COVID, will officially expire. And the U.S. relationship with Mexico has perhaps, the government that is, has perhaps never been worse, with cooperation on the drug war at its lowest point in decades, thanks to an administration in Mexico that doesn't seem interested in dealing with the cartels. Fentanyl, which is produced in Mexico with chemicals sourced from China, is now the leading cause of death for Americans between the ages of 18 and 49, according to our friends at the Washington Post. This week, ahead of Title 42 expiration, the Biden administration announced new steps to stem unauthorized migration, including opening new processing centers in Colombia and Guatemala, creating a new family reunification program, and increasing assistance to counter smuggling. Homeland Security Secretary Alejandro Mayorkas acknowledged there would be a border surge, but he also said it does not mean more migrants should come.
The smuggler's propaganda is false. Let me be clear. Our border is not open and will not be open after May 11th.
And Secretary Mayorkas joins me now. Mr. Secretary, welcome back to Meet the Press.
So, yeah, I think I pretty much pre-criticized that clip in terms of being skewed towards immigration because of their special guest. I mean, the one thing, you didn't hear a lot about the reason that we have so many people coming to our southern border as refugees with all the problems in, well, there's Venezuela, there's problems in Nicaragua, there's, the whole, Golden Triangle, is that what do they call that area? The El Salvador, Nicaragua, here, what is it? Nicaragua, El Salvador Triangle. Yeah, the Northern Triangle. That's right. That's El Salvador, Guatemala, and Honduras. They're having a lot of governmental breakdown. They talked about the governmental breakdown in Mexico, which is getting worse. But the reason we have so many refugees at our southern border is because people are legitimately seeking asylum coming from the Northern Triangle, coming from Venezuela, even coming from some parts of Mexico now. People have legitimate claims to ask for asylum, and that's not an illegal immigration problem. That's our laws require us to accept asylum seekers. And I also don't think they really went into how bad our immigration policy has been. They didn't talk about President Obama being the deporter in chief. They talked about the attempt at immigration reform 10 years ago during the Obama administration, and didn't really say it was the Republicans who killed it. So that's why I said the immigration policy history of the last 10 years was kind of superficial, you got in that report. So I guess I didn't completely pre-criticize the clip, but I do have two more short news summaries to show you. First, both are under a minute. First one is CNN State of the Union, Dana Bash covering the White House Correspondents Dinner, if I recall correctly, and the debt ceiling, which is a big issue coming up in the next several weeks. And I'll talk about that a little more after we watch that clip together over here.
Hello, I'm Dana Bash in Washington, where the state of our union is recovering. Well, Washington came out, they mingled, they laughed, as journalists joined political leaders at the White House Correspondents Dinner last night. President Biden highlighted the importance of a free press amid jokes about his age and House Republicans.
The free press is a pillar, maybe the pillar, of a free society, not the enemy.
Now it's back to business this morning with only weeks to avert a financial crisis. Speaker Kevin McCarthy muscled a bill through the House to raise the debt ceiling and impose $4.8 trillion in spending cuts over the next decade. Republicans see it as an opening salvo in talks with Democrats, but the president says he will not negotiate over paying the nation's bills. Here with me now is Senator Bernie Sanders, chairman of the Health Education.
And yeah, I will have a clip of Bernie Sanders coming up from that interview with Dana Bash on CNN State of the Union, where she asked someone older than Joe Biden to defend him for if he's too old to run for re-election. And that's the clip after next. But first, I'll show the shortest of the news summaries. CBS News' Face the Nation, which really focused on economics this week. And the economy may actually be more important to whether Biden gets reelected than his age. Like I said, I have a clip 11. If you're looking down in the video description, I have short summaries of all 12 clips. Clip 11 is Gary Cohn talking about maybe there being a mild recession, and that would probably have a larger effect on whether Biden gets reelected than his age, which is why I put that clip in there. But before I get to that, here is CBS News' Face the Nation, really brief news summary talking about the economy, the banks that have been collapsing, the Federal Reserve possibly raising interest rates again, and I'll talk about that a little more after we watch that clip together over here.
Good morning and welcome to Face the Nation. As we look to a new month, we're keeping a close eye on the economy, which continues to be the #1 issue of concern for Americans. Last week's news that economic growth slowed more than expected in the first quarter of the year will almost certainly factor into the Federal Reserve's decision-making this week as we prepare for yet another interest rate hike to try to curb inflation. Complicating the Fed's dilemma is the political battle on raising the debt ceiling, fallout from the collapse of Silicon Valley Bank, and the looming prospect of a third government bank rescue, this time for California-based First Republic. We begin with Democratic Congressman Ro Khanna, whose district...
And I don't have a Ro Khanna clip because Ro Khanna wasn't even asked about Biden's age. They didn't really bring up Biden's age at all on CBS News' Face the Nation. I don't know why, if you think that. I mean, the economy, like I said, might actually be more important, but in terms of his reelection or in terms of anything, but you can let me know what you think about that editorial choice by Face the Nation and which of the news summaries you think was best. Now I'm going to give you 3 different Democratic senators in different ways defending Joe Biden and his age running for re-election, starting with the senator from Vermont, Bernie Sanders, who, like I said, is a year older than Joe Biden, and he somehow turns the question into his like one of the things I love about Bernie Sanders. And by the way, I don't know if you see up here, I have It's Okay to Be Angry About Capitalism. That's his new book, which I actually haven't read yet. I put it up here before I read it, but I'm looking forward to reading his new book. And I guess, as you might expect from that book title, he has a way of turning any question into an answer about how we have to fight for working families. We have to fight for working people and working families because, you know, capitalism. And I'll talk about Bernie Sanders' answer a little more after we watch it together over here.
Who can afford that?
Senator, President Biden announced his campaign officially for re-election this week. He would be 86 years old by the end of his second term. You're 1 year older than President Biden. Is his age something that voters should consider in 2024?
Well, I think when you look at a candidate, you consider a lot. I think age is one thing. I think experience is another thing. I think your record that you have established is another thing. But to my mind, Dana, when you put it all together, what you have to look at is what does the candidate stand for? Which side are they on? Are they on the side of the billionaire class, or are they on the side of working people? Look, it is no great secret I ran against Biden. no great secret that he and I have strong differences of opinion. But when we live in a nation where you have a major political party, the Republican Party, where many, not all, but many of their leadership doesn't even believe in democracy. They maintain the myth that Trump won the last election. They're trying to keep people from voting. They're trying to deny women the right to control their own bodies. So that's a whole issue out there. If you believe in democracy, you want to see more people vote, not fewer people vote, I think the choice is pretty clear, and that choice is Biden. And second of all, what I do believe is the Democrats and the president have got to be stronger on working class issues. They've got to make it clear that we believe in a government that represents all, not just the few. Take on the greed of the insurance companies, the drug companies, Wall Street, all the big money interests, and start delivering for working class people. You do that, I think Biden is going to win in a landslide.
Senator Bernie Sanders, thank you so much for joining me this morning.
So that's the Bernie Sanders answer. Fighting for working families is why Biden isn't too old to run for re-election, or I don't know, it's kind of a non sequitur, but it was a Bernie Sanders answer, which is, if you like Bernie Sanders, is a good answer, I guess. And I do like Bernie Sanders. I actually voted for him in the California primary in the 2020 California primary and the 2016 California primary. Not for Hillary Clinton or Joe Biden, although I did vote for Hillary Clinton and Joe Biden in the general elections. But Bernie Sanders was my primary candidate, and I stand by that choice. I even made a video about it back in 2020 as to why I voted for him. If you want to go back and look through my old videos and find that out. But I'm going to show you 3 Democratic senators. I think Chris Coons might do the best job of answering the question here, especially I think he refers to the White House Correspondents Dinner. And Martha Raddatz actually, I think, does the best job of cross-examining, better than even Shannon Bream. You'd think, all I hear on Fox News is like how Biden is stumbling and people are watching him and they don't like what they see. They think he's senile or whatever. And Shannon Bream never brings that up, really, talking to Chris Van Hollen as a follow-up. It's only Martha Raddatz that does that, talking to Chris Coons. And I will talk about that a little more after we watch that short clip from ABC's This Week with George Stephanopoulos on Sunday together over here.
Things like that. But I want to go back to the polls. I know polls are not the thing you really want to talk about, but in that same poll, 48% of those polled said they didn't want him to run again. No elephant in the room here, because of age.
Yes, and you were with me at the White House Correspondents Dinner last night. There were thousands of folks in the room. And Martha, he was fast on his feet. He was agile. He had great delivery. You saw the State of the Union address, nearly an hour and a half. He was faster on his feet than most members of Congress. I think Joe Biden is agile, is capable. His record of leadership, both at home and abroad, makes him eminently qualified. And we should be focusing some on the wisdom and experience he brings to the job, in addition to the accomplishments he's had these first years.
I know you cite the State of the Union. He had good comedic timing last night. I will give him that. A lot of that's on teleprompter, and people have seen him stumble. These are people they talked to. 48% said it's age, because they've watched him. The president says, watch me. And some of those people have watched them and still have doubts. So what would you say to them about those stumbles, about rambling sometimes?
Martha, I'd say compare him to the alternative, recognize the value of experience and seasoning, recognize that his values align better with where we want America to go. And in my meetings and conversations with him in public and private, I'm more often the person who goes, the new senator from Missouri, than he does. Joe Biden is fit, capable, and ready to serve another term.
So what will this campaign be like? Obviously, the last one was during COVID.
Yeah, so there you see Martha Raddatz actually doing some follow-up about stumbling and rambling as a counterpoint to how well he did in his comedic timing at the White House Correspondents Dinner over the weekend, which you can watch, like I said, down under sources in the video description, or his State of the Union. He did a really good job on the State of the Union, and even had some like ad-lib back and forth with the audience. I mean, that's what you want to see, not just off the teleprompter, although honestly, reading the teleprompter is a large part of his job and isn't as easy as it looks, honestly. But I thought, in my opinion, that Chris Coons had the best of the three Democratic senator answers. I mean, I like Bernie Sanders just for being Bernie Sanders, but he wasn't really defending Biden as well as Chris Coons did. Chris Van Hollen did a adequate job talking to Shannon Bream on Fox News. Shannon Bream, didn't do as good a job cross-examining on, like I said, all I hear on Fox News is about the stumblings and the ramblings, and Biden doesn't know where he is. And he was asked by a kid the other day with the last country he traveled to, and he couldn't remember it was Ireland, even though he just came back from Ireland. And I hear that all the time on Fox News. Shannon Bream never brings that up at all. No real follow-up talking to Chris Van Hollen. I don't know why she was so lax in her Republican propaganda here, but not as good as Martha Raddatz if you're looking at it from the right. And I'll talk about that a little more after we watch that final Democratic senator clip together over here.
Going into the election.
What do you make about the debate over his age? Because both NBC and CBS have polls out that show, including Democrats, they're very worried about the issue of age. Axios writes this: even some of Biden's close advisors concede his age has diminished his energy, significantly limiting his schedule. Michelle Goldberg writes over at the New York Times, she thinks he's a great president, but adds this: it's hard to ignore the toll of Biden's years, no matter how hard elected Democrats try. She says essentially he should be taking a victory lap, not launching a re-election campaign. So what about this issue of age?
Well, I saw the president last night. He was in fighting form. I saw him at the event with the South Korean president. Again, great press conference. So look, I think people should judge presidents on their performance and their record, not on their age. And the president has a great record. I talked about some of the economic factors. He's also been one of the most productive presidents in recent history when it comes to a legislative record. Major bipartisan victories, right? We had the infrastructure bill. We had the Chips and Science bill to make sure we're more competitive vis-a-vis China and others, and the Veterans Health Care bill. And then there were also major wins when it came to bringing down the cost of prescription drugs and deploying more clean energy. So, Shannon, what I would say is just look at his record. That's what we should be judging people on, and not on age.
Well, what do you make of Senator Joe Manchin, one of your Democratic colleagues, who is very critical of one of those major legislative successes?
So, yeah, like I said, you can see Shannon Bream follows up with Joe Manchin's criticism of the Inflation Reduction Act. Doesn't even follow up on the whole age issue. I don't know. Maybe she's afraid that Chris Van Hollen might rebut what they are saying over and over again on Fox News, doesn't want to press him, or I don't know why that was, or maybe she was just having a bad day. But anyway, those are the three Democratic senators. Like I said, I thought Chris Coons did the best job. Bernie Sanders did the most Bernie job, and Shannon Bream did the worst job of the questioning. So that's my analysis of those three clips. You can let me know what you think about those three Democratic senators who were trying to defend Joe Biden and his age and his running to be the oldest U.S. president ever. But you heard Chris Van Hollen in that last clip talking about how the economy and his economic accomplishments are actually what's going to help Biden. And one of the big things that will determine that is how is the economy going to be 6 months from now, a year from now, a year and a half from now, as he's running for re-election. Is there going to be a recession? How deep will it be? How long will it last? And Gary Cohn, talking to Margaret Brennan over on CBS News' Face the Nation, actually was saying that some of the problems with the banks right now are making lending harder, so that there's less money out there, which is slowing down the economy, which is helping the Federal Reserve slow down the economy in a way that might make the recession more mild. That's kind of the end of what Gary Cohn is saying at the beginning of this clip, and then Margaret Brennan follows up, and I'll talk about that a little more after we watch that penultimate clip for the show today together over here.
To slowing down the economy and tamping down inflation.
So does it up the odds of a recession being more than mild?
It probably ups the odds, yes. I mean, it definitely ups the odds. It takes control out of the Fed. The Fed is no longer in total control of slowing down the economy. They've now got the banking industry playing along with them. But as we've seen in the economic data recently, the consumer in the United States still is in relatively good shape. They are starting to run out of savings. The money that they got during COVID, we put an enormous amount of stimulus into consumers' bank accounts.
And both administrations?
Both administrations. Every administration put an enormous amount of stimulus in the bank account. We see from the savings data that's starting to wear down and starting to run off. So as that runs off further and further, the economy would become more credit dependent to keep thriving. So I think we will see a slowdown. And I still think we're in a relatively decent shape. We may have a recession, but I still think we could muddle through the bottom here without a real deep recession.
And like I said, I think that might actually be more important as to whether Biden gets reelected than his age. Also, his opponent, if it's Donald Trump, I think it makes it more likely he'll be reelected, but we'll have to wait and see. One of the people running against Donald Trump is this guy, this millennial, Silicon Valley entrepreneur, Vivek Ramaswamy. Who is one of the youngest candidates, not the oldest, and he seems to be trying to play up the culture wars. He spent some time talking about how he's opposed to transgender rights, especially the rights of transgender children to get the medical care that is found, what medical care is recommended by the American Academy of Pediatrics, the American Medical Association, all the weight of medical opinion is to give gender-affirming care to children in terms of puberty blockers, not necessarily gender-affirming surgery, but that's what the science says. But Chuck Todd, for some reason, gives Vivek Ramaswamy the respect of calling him a scientist. Like, as a scientist, do you believe that gender is as binary as you're saying? Now, Vivek Ramaswamy has a bachelor's degree in biology. Does that make him a scientist? And then from Harvard, and then he went to Yale Law School and started some biotech companies. But is he really a scientist? He doesn't really get the science, I don't think, and he doesn't deserve the respect as a scientist that Chuck Todd gives him in the final newsmaker clip that I'm going to show you. This is another issue that might help decide the election. Are the culture wars, like the Republicans' hatred of transgender rights, is that what's going to decide the election? Probably not, but that's the final clip I'm going to show you, which I will criticize after we watch it together over here.
But how do you know it's that? Again, how do you know, are you confident that you know that gender is as binary as you're describing it? Are you confident that it isn't a spectrum?
I am.
Do you know this as a scientist?
Well, there's two X chromosomes if you're a woman, an X and a Y. That means you're a man. So there's a biological basis for this.
There's a lot of scientific research out there that says gender is a spectrum.
Chuck, I respectfully disagree. Gender dysphoria for most of our history, all the way through the DSM-5, has been characterized as a mental health disorder, and I don't think it's compassionate to affirm that. I think that's cruelty. When a kid is crying out for help, what they're asking for is, you got to ask the question of what else is going wrong at home? What else is going wrong at school? Let's be compassionate and get to the heart of that, rather than playing this game as though we're actually changing our medical understanding for the last 100 years.
I go back to this. If a parent is dealing with a child that has these, that may have these issues, trust me, the last thing they want to do is consider something like this. But if that is what they think could help their child pursue happiness, or they're not to kill themselves, why take away that option? Again, Why shouldn't it be up to the parent?
So part of why parents now suddenly feel that way, let's ask ourselves that, Chuck, is we've created a culture that teaches parents that they're being bigoted or that they're bad people if they don't actually take those steps. So part of what I think is, listen, gender dysphoria, for the rare few people who have suffered it, is a condition of suffering. My question is, why on earth are we going out of our way to create even more of it? And there's no doubt that the cultural movement in this country, even education, is creating more gender dysphoria. If it's a condition of suffering, let's not create more of it. That's what we're doing.
Let me ask you about the Disney dust-up with Ron DeSantis on one.
So yeah, no follow-up there from Chuck Todd about the whole XY discussion that Vivek Ramaswamy was talking about, which that actually is not even accurate as to what makes someone a man or a woman necessarily. First, not everyone is XX or XY. There are some other variations on those particular chromosomes, but you can have an XY, you can have an X and a Y chromosome and still develop female. There's this thing I've talked about months ago, or I don't know how long ago. There's something called androgen insensitivity syndrome. Some people say Jamie Lee Curtis has XY chromosomes and suffers from this, where it means that even though you have an X and a Y, your cells don't react to testosterone, and that's what causes a fetus to develop as a male in utero is testosterone. And if you can't react to testosterone, then you pretty much develop more as a female than as a male. You don't end up with ovaries and a uterus, and you kind of get a vaginal canal. And when I was a kid, my dad was a pediatric surgeon, and I remember he had this textbook about these genital anomalies and how pediatric surgeons used to fix them. They used to pretty much, if anyone had, was like ambiguous when they were born, they would just turn them into a girl. They would do surgery on infants to just turn them into a girl as best as they can. I think the reasoning is like it's easier to build a hole than a pole or something. I just remember hearing something like that, but they would make choices for ambiguous genitalia births that weren't based on anyone's choices. It was just based on what was surgically easier or whatever. Anyway, there are a lot of variations in the gender spectrum. I don't know why Chuck Todd let Vivek Ramaswamy get away with claiming that it was that binary and saying he was a scientist, and the whole XXXY thing, which is not even accurate, and then claiming, well, it's a mental illness. It's for many years it was considered a mental illness. Why don't we consider it a mental illness? Well, homosexuality was considered a mental illness for many years, and I mean, if you go back far enough, there were like psychologists who called not wanting to be a slave. There was actually something called fugitive slave syndrome, which was a psychological disorder where you weren't like happy being a slave. So, I mean, the suffering that comes from gender dysphoria is the lack of societal acceptance. It's not from it being a mental disorder in and of itself. And there are just some people, what percentage is controversial, but there are some people who just feel like they're in the wrong body and the wrong gendered body, and people have different gender expressions, and it's a lot more complicated than Chuck Todd let Vivek Ramaswamy get away with there. So I had to spend some time criticizing that final clip. I don't think that's going to be the deciding issue over Biden's age or whether there's a recession. Or anyway, you can let me know what you think about all the clips I picked out, my media criticism, my commentary. I spent like 8 or 10 hours working on the show as usual, so I hope you appreciate the work I put in, the time I spent coming up with the clips and the commentary. I will be doing it every Monday through the 2024 election cycle, which, as I've been pointing out for the last several weeks, I guess all the way goes all the way through January 2025, at least through January 6th, because that's one of the things we have to watch to find out who actually won these days now, I guess, in the post-Trump era. And I hope we continue in the post-Trump era in 2025. I guess we'll see. But thank you all for joining me. I appreciate all of you who showed up for the live show. Also, if you want to comment on the recorded show that I will release as soon as it's done processing after the live show, I think I'll probably have time to argue with people in the recorded show comment section. If there's anything I said that you disagree with, I'll happily support my position. So that's the show for this week. Thanks for joining me. Like I said, I will be back next Monday and every Monday through 2025, beginning of 2025 at least. And until then, or until I have some other reason to upload a video, I guess I will be seeing all of you around the internet.